My name's Kerry Smith and I'm from Plan International UK and I'm the head of advocacy, campaigns and research there. So in a way the kind of Matt focused a lot on War Child's work around making sure that children's stories and their agency and voice were at the central part of communications around what's happening to children in conflict areas. I'm going to be talking more about, from a development agency perspective, although we do work in a humanitarian context, how in terms of the programming that we run with children and how that's impacted the way we undertake advocacy and campaigning with children in terms of policy change. I think in terms of just making some comments about communications and fundraising in the international development sector right now, that there is a kind of informal code of conduct around how you portray children, and several of the kind of principles that Matt included are in those. There is masses of debate between agencies, within agencies, about what is appropriate and what is inappropriate, and there is always a tension, to be honest, about how we're going to make sure that a public respond and give money to appeals versus making sure that resilience and agency is also front and centre. There's a lot of criticism aimed at my previous workplace, Save the Children, about the way in which they have depicted children in their advertorials, but they also can get it right. And if anyone has watched the Syrian, the British girl being a kind of Syrian refugee, kind of viral 3-minute clip, that was a real strong example of being both shocking but powerful and, you know, bang on message. Don't think that the external things that you see in an agency is all everybody's opinions within it, and don't think there isn't hours of debate. There is. Who wins depends sometimes. But so what I wanted to talk to really was about how, in terms of the work that we're doing around girls' rights, we're working with girls and boys to take forward a kind of realization of girls' rights. And I think some of the things that was spoken about in the previous presentations are kind of quite interesting in that. And I think one of them is actually what has been the shift from the discourse from the World War and post-war years, especially with the proliferation and the kind of desire to create a kind of rights model. So the Universal Declaration of Rights, Civil and Political Rights Convention, Economic and Social Rights Convention, and in 1989, any charity that works with children now will talk about the Child Rights Convention. And what does that mean in terms of that question about, is it just children as future agents, or are children people now that have the ability to affect change and to participate, etc. So the Child Rights Convention is very interesting because it does obviously talk about education, health, etc. In terms of that child right now, but it's obviously selling a point to the adult world about you need to invest in these children because of their future, and in a way that's a lot of what charities say to governments, to the public, about why they should give you money, why we should do this programming. But, you know, central to the principles of the Child Rights Convention is also the right to participate. And there is this growing exploration from young people and children themselves, as well as charities, about how does the right to participate articulate itself? Where do states and institutions need to meet children and meet young people in order to create the space that there is actually a meaningful engagement with them in, you know, society, in the changes that they wish to see around them. So I think that's quite interesting to bear in mind. The other point I wanted to say was also, I think it is very interesting, the difference between early childhood and adolescence. So one of the arguments that you will have, or I have had, is you can't use the age 12 in around a child marriage example in a TV advert. Child marriage is much more common at the age 15. Yes, it does happen as young as 8, but it's much more common at 15. So having kind of conversations about how the public emotes and reacts to pictures of children, i.e. under 12-year-olds versus adolescents, who many of us probably, well, we work with as well, but who do we picture in terms of our work? We tend to go towards the emotive younger ages, and I think that's quite interesting as well. But if we're talking about advocacy and campaigning, we're then working more with older children who, because of child protection concerns, one, have a better sense of what they're willing to do and can speak up about whether they want their picture shown or not, whether they want their name shown or not, what parts of their stories they're willing to show or not. So it's quite a kind of interesting debate in terms of thinking about life cycles and actually the life cycles within childhood as well. So the Because I'm a Girl campaign was launched basically because Plan, as a global charity, felt that one of the things that wasn't being looked at within the spectrum of charities working on children at a global level was what was happening to adolescent girls, what was happening between the ages of 10 and 19 to adolescent girls. And part of that reflection was taken from our programming cycle, which is a child-centered community development approach where you have children's committees where you work with them around what are the issues that are affecting them and their peers in the 50 countries that we work in around the world, and has kind of been validated since. So last year, for instance, we did a survey in 10 countries of about 9,000 children to ask them about, well, what were the issues within certain frames of education, health, and others. The kind of focus on the campaign is threefold. It's around quality education for girls. So access, yes, but also about what's the quality of the education and how are they kind of going through that. Ending violence against girls, so thinking about school-related gender-based violence, going young into early childhood with FGM because of the impacts later on, talking about sexual reproductive health rights and sexual violence, and also child marriage and other pieces. But a kind of third pillar is about agency and voice of girls across the world. And I think this is the point which is quite interesting. And I'm going to show, hopefully, this video, if I can figure it out. Because as with War Child, one of the things that children's charities have been doing over the past 5 years is trying to think about how they work with children as partners in the communications material that they're using, but also in terms of articulating their stories. So in this video that I'm about to show you, we used a local film crew in Malawi to work with children's committees that we have programmed with for years in Malawi, and to kind of storyboard, take on the skills, so develop their own skills in terms of how they could turn into future filmmakers or produce their own things, to create a story about what happens in a girl's life. And I think what is interesting about this particular film is that we made it in 2012, and it is still our most popular film. It speaks to people in a way that films or materials that were not constructed in a very intensive, resource-heavy way don't, basically.
Because I'm a girl, I love braiding my sister's hair, dancing and playing with my friends, drawing diagrams and solving equations. Because I'm a girl, I have dreams. When I grow up, I want to be a doctor, a judge, or maybe a scientist. And I dream of having a family with my true love. But I know that none of these dreams will come true. Because I'm a girl, I'll be forced to drop out of school like so many other girls my age. Because I'm a girl, boys bully me. Men desire me. School is no longer a safe place for me to be. Because I'm a girl, I get up first and cook and clean. I come last in my family. Because I'm a girl, I have to get married at 13. Have babies before my body is ready. And have more children than I can keep healthy. Girls like me, without an education, are the poorest on the planet. We have no control over our lives and no way out of poverty. I know that staying in school would mean a better life than my mother. Then I could lead the way for my sisters and friends. We could decide our future, when to marry and which job. And together we could show everybody how girls make the community stronger and richer. The people at Plan see the potential in girls like me. They'll help me stay in a good, safe school, find new and better ways for my family to earn money, and give me skills for life so that I stay healthy and be all I can be. Give me a chance and I'll take it from here, because I am a girl.
So I think that's interesting because it does go back to that point about the kind of duality of the way in which children's charities are working with children right now. So on the one hand, we're obviously working with young people, trying to get them to articulate what's happening in their lives, putting out an empowered position of them in terms of, I'm going to take it from here, girls can be empowered, but we're also trying to make sure that people understand why they need to invest in children, because they're the potential future. If you give girls an investment, you will get something back. And I think that's part of the kind of ideas that we are going to be taking forward. I don't think you can kind of put it in one box or the other. The fact is that we are all, in some senses, future citizens today, citizens tomorrow, and we will change as we go along in our life cycle. But what charities that are working with children now, whether it's globally or domestically, are really trying to struggle with is how do we get that participatory now element more fully in the mix. So in terms of how Plan is trying to bring children more into the mix of its work, so one of them is around the direct intervention. So it's in the very nature of the model of the way in which we program. So we program around a principle called the child-centered community development. We work very much within that around children's capabilities and spaces for children within their local communities, to speak to authorities, to talk to authorities about what is happening in their lives and the changes they would like to see. That goes out from kind of village kind of authorities into school institutions, working with children in school clubs and talking about governance of schools. We have been, in the last few years, building more on that to take that to regional and national level advocacy. So working with those children to build into kind of representing the pieces of change they want to see in their lives, having chosen the subjects they want to take forward to national authorities. I think one of the real learnings that we've had from investing more in this policy change approach with these young children, not just in terms of the immediate surroundings, is the resources and the investment, and to some extent, the benefit you then get of actually working with very marginalised and rural children in the world. And I don't know, I think that's an interesting analysis to put in the UK context as well. I mean, I think we think that everybody's kind of connected to the internet here in the UK. We think that there is a lot of agency amongst, or ability to kind of speak or have a voice if certain connections are made. But actually dealing with extremely poor children, whether kind of relative poverty here in the UK versus what's happening in Africa and other places, I think really thinking about how you work with extremely marginalised children is quite interesting in the investment that takes to enable them to have the capabilities, the confidence, the security to then talk about what they want to see happen. In terms of campaigning, one of the things that Plan does is that we have an internal kind of governance structure which has a child trustee on our board, which has children kind of directing the campaigns they want to see in terms of kind of facilitative youth-led advocacy movements around FGM and child marriage, which we're working with at the moment. The young representatives, not all children, but from 15 to 24, are choosing the subjects, the where, the how, the what, and we're trying to facilitate them in that. And then I think the kind of other element is also in terms of wanting to connect more to young people as a public, as a stakeholder in questions around international development more broadly, or children's and girls' rights globally more broadly, and how do we facilitate that voice and that engagement going forward. And I think that's where, from Plan's perspective, I think we need kind of greater investment going forward. I think that's all I wanted to say, because I actually wanted to have some questions, because the previous presentations brought up some questions for me about, so what are the cycles of the way in which children are represented, and do people in this room who have been doing lots of differentiated research on kind of different countries and their relationships with children in the past see that there are kind of different changes, and that there is either cycles, or that there has been, with the advent of discussions more around rights from the 1940s and 50s, a change in the way children are depicted in more recent history. I don't know, that's my question to you. But I think that would be quite interesting as well. There we go.